students. I hope that you are having a wonderful day full of classes and trainings. I am here to talk to you a little bit about community accountability, which is what we call our lovely conduct process here. My name is Hannah Niblett. You've probably been introduced to me at this point already, but I am the Kennedy RD. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I will be talking through a PowerPoint today. And then I will also get to show you a video from Maren Bishop, who is over in student care and support. So I'll get to tell you a little bit about how our conduct process works. This is mostly just going to be the overview of the documentation part of this. You will have behind closed doors that you will talk through in your staff meetings, and that is where you'll really talk about what you do in the scenario with the students. This is really talking about how we document it and how we log it, and how students will walk through our process in meeting with RDs, and what that process looks like even after that. Okay, so just a disclaimer to begin. This is going to feel like a lot of information. It's going to feel like we're asking you to drink from a fire hose here. So just know that even though this is a lot of information, know that you will always be able to reference it. You can also always ask your returning RA peers as well as your RD, or any RD on campus will be able to help you out with this. A little overview of the structure. So we'll talk about the incident that occurs, documentation of that incident, and then any follow-up procedures. We'll also throughout the presentation be talking about roles, so who is responsible for what in each scenario, because we all play a part in this, and then I'll also talk through our purpose of why we do what we do. Okay, so we'll start with the incident occurring. So this is before documentation begins. Just an overview of the whole accountability process. So the purpose for this process, it allows for uniformity, so that us RDs are able to give everyone a fair chance at being able to talk through the situation themselves. And it also allows for a learning opportunity. So these students sometimes, I mean, this might be the first time they're ever getting in trouble at school. So it really just allows us to be able to sit down, talk to them about what happened, and then hopefully avoid any of these situations happening for them again in the future. So the RA role in all of this is just the documenter. So sometimes, you know, you guys are on the front lines. It's going to feel like you're the one who's just like getting students in trouble. But really, you're just there to document the situation, and then the RD later is the one who makes the decisions. So the student's role in all this, of course, is the participant. So they are the one who allegedly made a choice to violate our policy, or be in a situation where they were complacent in a policy violation. So that is their role. And then the RD is the adjudicator and the helper. So again, we're the ones who are there to hopefully create, you know, an educational experience for the student and to determine whether they are responsible or not in a given scenario. So basically what this process looks like, the student makes a choice, so the incident occurs. The RA will document the situation. The student will have a hearing with the RD or an AD or with the Community Accountability Office. They will receive an outcome letter with sanctions detailed. So what, if they're found responsible, what do they have to do as a result of that? And then the optional last one is the appeal process. So if the student is not happy with how the situation was concluded, they are able to appeal the decision. Okay, so what you will do, which we'll talk through in BCDs, is when the situation happens, so if you find students with alcohol, you are going to begin the documentation on scene, and you're going to gather as much information as you can. I recommend taking a little notebook with you if you're going to respond to an incident while you're on call, or a lot of students will tend to take notes in their phone. So what you want to do is make sure that you get the names of every single person present. no matter who it is. If they say that they weren't drinking or whatever, make sure that you get everyone's name. Make sure that you get their BUID as well. If they don't go to Belmont, you can also get a picture of their driver's license or get their driver's license number. You need photographs of any alcohol that is present. So if there's alcohol, make sure that you're taking a picture. Even if it's just an empty bottle, it is helpful for us to know exactly the amount that was there and how many bottles were there. And then any situational notes that you want to gather. So if you notice that someone's demeanor, if they differ between students, if somebody is like actively nervous and is asking tons of questions, if they say anything that sounds like they are admitting to it, make sure that you jot those down because those are easily forgotten things. So as long as you have those written down, you'll be able to, your documentation will be a breeze. So the role of the photos, again, is just to make sure that we have all the information we possibly can. It illustrates where things were found, illustrates the volume. A picture really does say 1,000 words in this scenario, so that the RDs are able to look at these, and it definitely assists with the context of the situation. Okay, so now you're prepared. Now that you're prepared to handle an accountability situation, this section is how you are going to address a student. So your role is now documenting and being a university representative. So again, the RA role is a documenter, and you will give the students clarifying steps. So make sure, like I said, to take notes. So make sure that you're telling the student, hey, I'm documenting you for allegedly violating a policy. No student is guaranteed to be found guilty. So that will be determined in the hearing process. And again, these notes will help you remember the details of the situation. So you can also let them know that they will be receiving a notice in their email. So once the situation is documented, the RD will go into the system and they will send them an initial letter, and it'll tell them, hey, you have 2 days to set up a meeting with me so that we can talk through this. And you do all of this, and then you'll go through and do the maxient. That's how you report the whole situation, but we'll look at this in just a second. Okay, so next is the narrative. So this is the absolute most important part. This is where you sit down after the situation is completely done with. You sit down with whoever was there with you in the situation, and it's best to do this immediately after the situation is over. You sit down with your laptop, and you can also use one of our university iPads, and you write out every bit of the process. And we have a uniform way that we do this that I'll tell you about. But we suggest doing this on a Word document, and then you can start the maxient. So that way you have it saved in multiple places. So like I said, this is a very important part of the adjudication process. It is an official document, so once you've written it down and it is put through the maxient system, we have that on record for a long time. So this has before been given to courts if someone decides to sue or something like that, something major, which I would say doesn't happen often. But just know that whatever you write in here, it should be well written, it should be free of bias, and it should be written in the third person. So an example of this is you will address all residents as TK resident Hannah Niblett, with their BUID in parentheses, and then later you can reference them as resident Niblett using their last name. I'll show you a full narrative in just a second, but make sure that it's filled out fully, that it is observant and detailed, and then make sure that you provide a picture of the incident, that if your RD was to sit down and know nothing about what happened, they could read this narrative and know exactly what happened without having ever been there. So making sure that it's very thorough and descriptive. Um, so I also want to tell you a little bit about the role of the Community Accountability Office. So outside of the Department of Residence Life, we do have an Office of Community Accountability. Our director of that, her name is Janelle Briscoe, and she oversees all of campus student conduct. So there are some situations that will escalate even higher than the RDs and the assistant directors and go straight to Janelle. Some of those include things like drug cases and such. So basically, she's the reader and adjudicator of special cases. And sometimes those, if there's alcohol resulting in hospitalization, that's another thing she hears, as well as off-campus students. So just remember that once you write this and submit it, a lot of people are going to be reading it. Okay. Okay, so now we'll look at an example passage, and I want you to be thinking as you read through this in your head, what about this is not descriptive enough? So think about this from the perspective of an RD, and you just sat down, you're looking at this, you're reading it. What else would you need to know to be able to make a decision on this case? So I'll read it for you. I was performing health and safety inspections, and upon entering the room, I found a bottle of alcohol. Contacted the RD, and the alcohol was properly disposed of. RA informed the students that the situation would be officially documented. So I know personally, after reading this, I would have a lot of questions. So some of the questions you might ask during this is, okay, so whose room was it? You know, who is documenting this? I don't have the RA. What type of alcohol was there? How much alcohol was there? So when did this happen? We don't know based on this narrative. It doesn't tell us what day or time. And then it doesn't, you know, spell out how the RA told the student about how it was going to be documented, anything like that. So it's kind of surface level. So we're just going to go ahead and say that this is probably not a good example of a narrative practice. But here is an example of a better narrative. So on Tuesday, March 20th at 8:17 p.m., okay, there's our date and time, RA on duty, David Wallace, was performing health and safety inspections with RA Michael Scott. RA Wallace and RA Scott knocked at Dickens 116 and opened the door 30 seconds after 3 knocks that nobody responded to. Upon opening the door, RA Scott noticed a bottle of 750 milliliters of Red Cat wine sitting on the desk. The bottle was empty and smelled of alcohol. RA Wallace contacted RD Pamela Beasley to inform her about the alcohol. RD Beasley disposed of the alcohol and no other violations were found in the room. RA Scott left a health and safety slip in room 116 for residents Jim Halpert and Dwight Shrew with their BUIDs listed. So, yes, that is funny. Those are all Office characters. If you're not familiar with it, I just watched it. But this is a much better example, and it answers all of those questions that we asked. So it's really good to think of a mental checklist as you're writing through this and continuing to picture yourself from someone's point of view who wasn't there. So here's a checklist. Is it free from all personal opinion or judgment? Is it written in third person? Is it clear? If there's alcohol, is it itemized? Make sure that your spelling and grammar looks good. And then answer all the W questions, who, what, when, where, and why. And only if it has to do with intent, of course. The why is mostly going to be explained by the student in the conduct hearing. And then, of course, make sure that there's any situational information that you can give. Okay, so I'll go ahead and tell you now, you are going to have a little assignment after this. You guys are going to get to do some narrative practice. So this is something that all RAs do every single year. On page 36 of your RA manual, there is a scenario listed. So this, I think, was already sent to you in PDF form, but your RD can help you with this after this session. But there on page 36, there is a scenario there. You are going to practice a narrative and you're going to submit it to your RD. So This will be so that your RD can provide you some feedback after you've written your first one. They're going to give you some specific details about how they think that you can improve or what you did really well. Making sure that you handled all of this checklist here. If it's written in third person, these are some of the things that they're going to be looking for. So here's your checklist. So were there photos taken? Yes. Was the narrative created in a Word document? Yes. Make sure that it's highlighted in your duty log if you're on call, or make sure that you're following building specific protocol for communication with your RD. If your RD has already explained to you how they best get information from you guys, make sure that you're following that. And then now it's time for a mag stamp. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to pull up the incident reporting form. So I will be sending this to you in an email, so you'll have this link right here that you'll be able to access anytime. What I would suggest and what I did when I was an RA was making a tab up here so that you can always access it. You can just click on it and it goes straight to this form. So this is what it looks like. You are going to fill out your full name here, your position and title, so you'll probably put resident assistant. You'll add your email address here. The nature of the report, so you will always be using one of these two typically when you're reporting conduct, but we do have a Title IX option down here, which you'll be trained on Title IX as well. But if you're not doing health and safety checks, it will always be student conduct report. Urgency of the report, we will typically always put normal here. I've never seen a situation where we have put critical. Date of the incident, so we're just going to say it's today. Time of the incident, say 12 a.m. Location, so this is where you'll scroll down to the residence life locations options and you'll figure out where you were. So we'll say we were in Kennedy, specifically Kennedy 543. So now you'll go to your involved parties. So this is where you'll list every individual involved in the situation. So you don't have to put yourself here. Actually, please don't put yourself here. If you were to list yourself as a party, then a case would be created in Maxient as if you were an alleged student in the situation. So you'll leave your name out of here, but you will add it to the narrative. So you'll put their name here, select their gender, select their role here. So any student who has violated our policies will be alleged. And then you'll put their BUID here, their date of birth, which you can pull off of THD, and their email address. I will say, if you get their BUID right and their name correct, then these two will auto-populate for you. So this is not the most necessary part of it. Just make sure we have their name and their BUID. Okay, so when you want to add another student, if there were a lot of students, then you can just add another party here and just do the same thing over. There's also a note up here that says, for non-students, please write their last name and first name in the section labeled BUID. So you would put Doe John here. So that's how you would do that. Here's an example that will always be there for you. So this is where you'll copy and paste your narrative that you've already written. And then here is an option where you will choose files where you can select photos. And then you don't have to do this, but I always clicked email me a copy of this report so that you will be able to look back and read it. It's also helpful to send to your RD if they ask for it. And then you'll click submit report, which I won't do right now. But yeah. So while we're here, I'll go ahead and show you that we do have a link for our student concerns report. I'm going to show you a video in just a little bit about what student concerns office is, but you can see that it looks very, very similar to the conduct report And this is where you'll put students who are experiencing, where you'll put in a report for students who are experiencing any of these. Anything that you feel like the Office of Student Care and Support needs to know about. Okay. If you have any narrative questions, make sure that you're asking your RD. Okay. So I just showed you how to fill out your Maxient. Here is a lovely flow chart that you can access. I can attach it to the email that I send, but this is just a more fun looking just chart of how you submit an IR. Okay, so now after the situation has occurred, make sure that you submit that IR immediately. Issues of community accountability must be able to move through the process swiftly because, as you guys can imagine, after an incident happened, the student's probably on the edge of their seat wondering what's going to happen. So the quicker it goes through the process, the more we will remember details, the more students will get out of the whole process. So when you submit the IR, it automatically goes to the RD of the building where the incident occurs, but will be sent to the appropriate RD after that. So if the situation happened in Patton, but it was a TK resident, that IR for TK will be sent to the TK RD, etc. One thing that I didn't mention when I showed you the report is don't highlight students as witnesses if they are not an involved party. You can keep those people in the description. So really only use that option for alleged. Any witnesses who were there can just be added to the incident report into the narrative. Okay, so what's next after you submit that IR? It's the adjudication process. So the role of the RA after the situation occurs, so the next day, is just to follow up with the student, support, love, and care. So just making sure that that student knows that you're still there for them, even though you were the one who caught them violating that policy. Know that we still care for them, just like any other student. So just make sure that you're kind to them and really just humanize the situation. The role of the student is the participant in the adjudication process, and the role of the RD is to be educational and conversational. So the student will come in, sit down in the office. Well, this year it'll probably be over Zoom, but we give some ground rules for the situation, and then the student just gets to tell their side of the story. And then we, of course, have your account of the story in our IR. And we do read that IR to the student. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're making sure that you're free of bias. Okay, one other thing that I want to share with you is our responsible friend clause. So to explain responsible friend, this was one of the pieces of feedback that we got from training last year that we could have explained this better. So I really want to make sure that you understand this. So here's an example situation. There is a student seeking medical attention for their intoxicated friend. However, the student who's seeking the medical attention for their friend is also intoxicated. So you can imagine, if you're drunk and your friend's drunk, but they need help, you might be afraid to call campus security because you're afraid that you're going to get in trouble because you've been drinking and you're underage. Okay, this clause is to make sure that that student still calls to get help for that friend, because that is the most immediate concern in that situation. We want to make sure that if that student needs medical attention, that they get it, and we don't want you to worry about anything else in that moment, because the health and safety of that student is much more important than getting the other student in trouble for having drank underage. So there are a few must-haves for this to be able to apply to students. They have to have contacted campus security, Res Life, or an emergency official to report the incident. They have to have stayed with the student until the faculty and staff arrives. And one sad thing, this doesn't apply to personal emergencies. So if you're intoxicated and you call campus security yourself, you're not exempt from also having a conduct situation after that regarding the underage alcohol drinking. So these students, the responsible friend will meet with Janelle in the Community Accountability Office. However, they don't have any sanctioning, and it doesn't go on their official record. This information will just be kept for internal purposes so that we know if the student gets in trouble again for underage alcohol or whatever the case may be, that we know that this has happened in the past. But the parents are notified via letter. And this is just so that the student is held responsible for their actions, but it doesn't have any long-term effects because they did the right thing by calling and seeking medical attention for their friend. If you have any questions about that, you can ask me or you can ask your RD. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a video of Maren Bishop, who has just been so kind as to send us a video to introduce us to student care and support. And she is going to talk through that with you guys. So I'm going to share my screen again.
All right, hi, my name is Maren Bishop. I serve as the Assistant Director for Student Care and Support here in the Student Life area, and I'm going to give you an introduction to Student Care and Support here in the Student Life area. So our team members include Angie Bryant, who is our Assistant Dean of Student Support Services, and Ms. Bryant also serves as our Institutional Case Manager. And then there's also me. I serve as our Assistant Director for Student Care and Support, and I also serve as one of our 2 University Deputy Case Managers. So we also have 2 graduate assistants for this year, McLean Beeman and Kyle Bierman, who are a part of our team as well. Now for Student Care and Support, our office officially launched in January 2020. We existed prior to that, and we were called the Student Concerns Office. So previously we were focused more on kind of student concerns where they got more to a crisis level. And so with this focus on student care and support, we're moving more to looking at a continuum of care and being more responsive as we work with our students. So our office, what we aim to do is provide coaching and support to students who are experiencing difficulties that might prevent them from engaging fully in their Belmont experience. We walk alongside these students as they navigate university procedures and policies and get access to the support services that they need. And we also work with and provide support for our university faculty and staff as they care for our students. So for our scope of service, we focus on 3 areas: triage, support, and education. Now with triage, this is where we are going to help figure out what is going on with the student. So they might have gotten referred to our office, and then we meet with them and have a conversation to just kind of figure out what is happening and then go from there. We also work as part of the university's behavioral intervention team, which is an interdisciplinary group of first responders where we will collaborate with them if it's more of a crisis or an emergency. Now with the support component of our work, we work with students so they can develop coping strategies and support plans to manage these difficulties that they're facing. Some of those resources that we might connect them to are on or off campus. And we're also going to talk with students about policies regarding their academics, disability support, financial assistance, and residential life. And then also academic options, including course withdrawals, taking leave of absence, and other things that might impact their academic record. Now with education, for that part of our work, we provide education, consultation, and support for all of our different campus partners, faculty, staff, and parents. And we're part of the interdisciplinary student care team that brings more than 20 different departments together to really create a seamlessness for holistic student care. We provide training and support to that group, and we also look at trends on the local and national levels. So that way we really are taking into account the complete picture of what our students are working with and what resources are available for them. Now, our different care partners on campus, we get the pleasure of working with a lot of different offices here on campus, including counseling services and health services, campus security and Title IX, as well as university ministries, some of the academic focused student support services, some of the student engagement and wellness areas, as well as more of the administrative areas like registrar, student financial services, admissions, some of the support offices for special populations like our veterans and Bridges to Belmont. And we also work closely with Residence Life. You all are one of my favorites. And we work really closely with all of our Resident Life partners, including our RAs, because you all are really eyes and ears on the ground in a way that I can't be. So you all are really invaluable to the work that we do. And this upcoming year, just given the unique challenges that our world is presenting, we're going to be looking for different ways that we can partner with all of our different campus offices to work more closely together to provide better service for our students. So we're looking forward to figuring out different and new ways that we can work with each other. Now, for issues that we provide care for, what I like to tell folks is that we really help with any issues that students are dealing with in or out of the classroom. So it's really whatever life might bring up. So that ranges quite a bit from anything from unexplained class absences to changes in behavior, health issues, including physical, mental, and emotional health. If a parent calls in and they're concerned about their student, grieving the loss of a family member, hospitalization, different types of stress, including family, financial, and relationship. If our student might have been a witness to a traumatic event, maybe they're feeling whelmed or socially isolated, really anything that you can think of, our office winds up working with students as they are trying to kind of work through that issue and then developing ways that they can take care of themselves moving forward. Now, some of the things that we say to look for, so these are some signs of disturbing or disruptive behavior. So some incongruent emotional responses, maybe they kind of overreact or have an outburst out in a hallway, for example. That's something that we hear from our RAs. Bizarre behavior, maybe really irritable. And for faculty, they'll let us know that that student's being disruptive in the classroom. Signs of a student in distress, that maybe they mention something that's happened in their life. They start missing class more often. They seem more anxious than usual. And what we will also see is a decrease in the quality of work that they're submitting in the classroom, and also some issues where students are not keeping up with hygiene, their room is a mess, just because they are overwhelmed with other things where they're not able to take care of themselves well. Now, when students are in crisis, this is where they are expressing suicidal thoughts or gestures, they're making threats to other people, there's self-harm, intimidating behaviors, and this is where we will often work closely with campus security and the on-call system, including the Dean on-call and the RD on-call for those students. Now, what is a student concern? And that's a lot of the way that you all will interact with the student care and support team, is that you'll submit a student concern. So any of the issues that we just talked about, we label as a potential student concern. And so really, if it's anything that might negatively impact a student, we say, let us know. We want to be aware of that so we can help connect a student with the resources that are going to help them the best. And so student concerns really is the reporting system that Belmont uses to share those concerns to a centralized location. So all of those that come in, I actually review and then help get them connected with a staff member that's part of the student care team to then start doing some of the coaching and support work that happens. Now, to submit a student concern, there are a few different ways to do that. Probably the way that you all will use the most often in your job as an RA is using our Maxient form, and you can access that in a couple of different ways. It's in my Belmont in the student concerns area. It's also on the Student Life website, and then I've also provided the link here as well. You can also contact us via email at studentconcerns@belmont.edu, or studentcare@belmont.edu. And then we can also be accessed via phone. This phone number here on the screen is actually the Dean of Students' office. That phone is always answered during regular business hours, so that's a surefire way to get connected to somebody if someone happens to call, and then they'll get them routed to one of our team members. Now, this is actually what our student concern form looks like. So if you were to pull up this form, this is our Maxient reporting form. So this gives us basically where you're able to tell us information about what is happening. So pretty straightforward. And some of you may have already used this in the past as an RA in that job experience, or maybe that you've submitted a student concern about a friend in the past. Now, the information that we're looking for when you submit a student concern, the student's name and Belmont ID number, what happened, who was involved, have you spoken with the student, were any actions taken, has the student been referred to any resources, and any other relevant information. So sometimes what will happen with a student concern is that there will be something that happens, and as part of your job as an RA, you will have a conversation with that student. You'll suggest different resources like counseling services or university ministries. And then you'll write up a student concern notification form after the fact and let us know what has taken place and what referrals that you've already made in helping that student. Now, some tips that we suggest when you're thinking about as you're writing the student concern: state the facts. Let us know what you saw and what you heard. Avoid drawing conclusions or diagnosing an issue. We are always very careful because we are not licensed counselors and other types of professional staff that require licensure. So we always say, be very clear about what you heard and what you saw. Let's leave the diagnosis up to the professionals. So you don't have to have a psychology degree or anything. Just let us know what you saw and what you heard, and then that information will allow us to make sure that we circle the wagons, get the support that the student needs in a very cohesive way. Now, what happens after that student concern comes in? So we will always let the person who submits the concern know that it has been received. So Maxient will send an automatic email just letting you know that the form has been submitted. Our office will also contact you in case we might have additional questions that we want to follow up on, or just to let you know a human being has reviewed it and we're going to be taking it from there. So what we will do is we'll read the concern and then determine what the next step might need to be. Now, sometimes action isn't needed by a student care and support team member because the issue has already been addressed. So maybe the resident director had to conduct QPR, for example, or a professor referred the student over to counseling services. So the primary issue has been resolved. We might follow up with the student just to check in with them at a later point, but the initial issue has been taken care of. Now, how we follow up with a student will vary. So we will usually check in with the student. We will offer to meet with them. And for this fall, we're going to have options to meet via Zoom, phone call, or in person as needed. However we meet with a student, whatever format that we use, we're going to talk about coping strategies, develop a care plan for the student with their input. We want students to know they're in charge of that process. So they are going to be the ones driving the bus, so to speak. We're just kind of helping and giving advice and suggestions. We're going to talk with the student to see if they might need to revise their class schedule. We're going to talk about different resources and see which ones the student would want to connect with. And really, follow up and provide any coaching and support to the person that submitted the concern. We might reach out to other students that have been impacted. If it was a traumatic event, for example, and they were witnesses to that, we would follow up with them just to check in to see if they needed anything. And for some special circumstances, we might also do some academic advocacy. For example, if a student is dealing with a Title IX issue, they might need some additional academic assistance, and so we would help with that. Now, for ongoing support and follow-up care, what we try to do is coordinate the care and communication among all the different support offices, so that way we can provide a singular point of contact for students and their families. This can be really helpful and important if the student is dealing with a significant health issue that might require long-term care or hospitalization where they're not on campus for the time being. So that's where our office will step in and try to help be that point of contact where the parents can call in and give updates, and we can disseminate that information as we might need to. And we'll also follow up with each student, just depending on what they were going through, follow up to check in, whatever that might look like. And that will vary because for each student in their particular situation, we're going to be flexible and adapt to what they need. So that is all of our information. If you do have questions, I forgot to include our contact information other than what was on that initial slide, but you can feel free to contact us as you might need to.
Okay, well, if you see Maren around campus, thank her for helping us out and giving us that information. But that is all that I have for you today. So the next step is to do that practice narrative on page 36 of your RA manual. And you can ask your RD for when they want that by. One thing I did want to note is that whenever you are filling out the Maxient for that case, make sure that you are putting your building instead of Patton Bear House. So in the incident, it happens in Patton Bear House, but we would love for you to put your building there so that it will get directed to your RD. If you have questions about that, you can ask your RD for clarification. But okay, well, I hope you have a wonderful day.